This entire week, we've been exploring the origins of the Lumineth Realmlord, their birth and fall and rise to prominence, and in yesterday's video, we explored the 4 great nations and sifted out what makes each of them unique. Well, today we're going to talk about the lore behind the specific units this army can field, because there's a difference between talking about a nation or a people group and talking about its military, right? It's a very subset of those citizens. And there's not many units in this army at all, because the bulk of it is more kind of like a citizen militia than a standing army like the Stormcast Eternals, but we'll talk about most of the units. One thing I'll say up front though is we are going to pass on Teclis in this video. He is a god with his own troubled backstory and complex relationships, so I do think he deserves his own dedicated video, but I promise I won't make you wait long for it. The Alarith, those focused on stone elementals, I'll also put them in their own video, because it takes a bit of time to explain what they're tapping into, but we're going to talk about everything else here, the leaders, ground troops, and more. And we're going to kick things off with a unit that is just as interesting as Teclis in my opinion, and caught the eye of so many, and that is the Light of Eltharion. This is a character that is firmly tied to Warhammer fantasy battles, fan favorites, Eltharion the Grim or the Blind. He was a seriously mighty general in the Old World, and an integral part of the High Elf and Dark Elf Civil War. During the events of the End Times, Eltharion was tasked with halting Archon the Black from resurrecting Nagash, which would have kind of stopped the string of events leading to the end of the world. Ultimately, he met his end at the hand of Archon himself, being blasted away into dust with a huge shot of death magic. And the End Times is really what I personally know him from, as I wasn't playing, fantasy battles long before AOS launched. I was a bit more focused on Teclis and magic stuff back then. Well, what we learn here is that Archon and Nagash either didn't or could not take Eltharion's soul for themselves. In fact, it was blown away that it was just shot into pieces. But Teclis thought long and hard about the kinds of leaders his new army needed. And so he went into meditation and fasting, and for a long time he sat searching the ether for the disparate parts of Eltharion's soul, knowing that the strongest of wills can never be fully extinguished. When he felt that he had, all the pieces, so to speak, Teclis visited Iliatha, seeing an elf that bore a striking resemblance to Eltharion of old. Now, if you remember from yesterday's video, Iliatha is the nation that devised how to split people, essentially being able to make doppelgangers. And so a doppelganger of Eltharion's look-alike was made, but he didn't have a piece of his soul in there. So Teclis crafted this resplendent armor and weaponry from all the memories of his long-forgotten warrior and imbued the mage god's power within them. And when Teclis finally put the recovered soul of Eltharion into its new host, he was devastated to see the body immediately turn to ash. Teclis wept at the failure to resurrect an old ally, but was astonished when the armor that he was now empty because the body turned to ash, sat up and saluted. No body in that armor, just brilliant, glowing light exuding from it. Whatever Archon did to him seems to have permanently scarred the hero's soul, but now he walks among his people again, leading them into battle. Although he has no mouth, the Lumineth hear his commands, and though he has no legs, he never falters or stumbles. And though he has no arms, he wields a pair of deadly artifacts that make him a true threat on the battlefield. Next are the Sinari Cathalars, and I feel like Games Workshop just makes these names to spite me. And this unit is a strange one. One thing we didn't cover too much this week is Ether Quartz, the realm stone of Hysh. I plan to do a deeper focus on that when I talked about Hysh itself as a realm, but it's important to understand this character. So essentially, when you use Ether Quartz, it supercharges whatever you're doing, but at a cost. The cost is extreme emotion swelling up inside of you, right? It's like getting a supercharge of enlightenment and reason and logic, but then all of a sudden the come down from that is a big void of emotional depth and that kind of stuff, and anguish and all that, just dark feelings. And all of that darkness acted as kind of an accelerant and led to the Spire Fall. And of course, for elves, they are inherently dubious of intense emotion or interactions because those are the kinds of things that feed Slaanesh, their eternal enemy. But at the time, we need this resource to fight effectively, and so the solution is this unit, the Cathars. These mystics are essentially wizards who, instead of being schooled in traditional, fields of magic, have learned to manipulate emotions with the same expertise. As soldiers are using ether quartz in battle, the minute the Cathar senses an emotional disturbance, they can actually pull that darkness from their kin and even toss that negative energy upon the enemy, filling them with intense emotions of fear and desperation and cowardice. So they aren't really like leaders per se, though they can command a lot of solemn respect and they can lead an army out. Generally, though, they exist to ensure that the ether quartz never becomes a blight on the Lumineth like it did leading up to the Spirefall. She is calmness and clarity of purpose made manifest, because being able to defeat a Slaanesh army doesn't matter if you exude enough intense emotion to feed him to make more demons. Now at this point we're going to move into the Vanri, also known as the Shining Host. These are the men and women who make up the vast bulk of the Lumineth Realmlord armies, and they stand apart from other factions in that they are all innate wizards, powerful masters of magic that can channel their combined might into devastating effect. Also, side note, these are the most high elfy, as far as aesthetics go, units in the book, right? And their ranks are made up of the Vanri Aurelian Wardens, the Vanri Aurelian Sentinels, and the Vanri Dawn Riders. There's not a massive amount of lore on each of them, but we'll tackle it here. Starting off with the Wardens. These are the rank and flank spearmen of the Lumineth, but there's a lot more going on under the hood. Of course, as we mentioned a few times this week, every Lumineth is a wizard in their own right. And these bricks of spearmen can channel their arcane power into their spears, allowing them to carve through the toughest of armor. And let's talk about those spears, because it's about 3 elves long, okay? It's a bad unit of measurement, I'm going to agree, but it is. They boast incredibly well-crafted weapons that aren't really focused so much on offense as they are kind of more on defense, being a bulwark, a rock that the enemy will break upon. Many have tried to charge a shield wall of wardens and paid for it with their lives. In addition to these empowered spears, a really cool thing happens when they stand in their shield wall formation. They are able to essentially channel shimmering light from their shields, and it has so much intensity that it can blind enemies right as they're making contact, which is of course the best time to blind them, because that's when your shield wall can, jam the spears into their hearts. Where other armies want to use camouflage or illusion to stay safe, these warriors essentially draw the line in the sand and dare the enemy to cross it, blinding you while you do so. Now next up are the Sentinels. These are the archers of the Lumineth Realmlords, and in other factions archers exist but generally act as a support unit. Not so much here. The bow is a fiercely respected weapon of the Lumineth. They've crafted and refined archery to both an art and a science. To strike down threats without endangering yourself or others is the highest goal of the Lumineth. And these warriors are able to rain down arrows upon their enemy with impunity and stand far away from the main battle. By carefully choosing which strings, because if you haven't seen the models, they have 3 strings on their bow, by carefully calibrating which ones to pull back, they can essentially fire as either a longbow, seeing arrows hurl upwards in terrific arcs and striking enemies far away, albeit with less force behind them, or they can fire them as a short bow, pulling all their force into the closer targets, allowing them to tear through armor. One of the other things that's really cool here about the Sentinels is their leader. He has this little bird with him nearly all the time, and he has like a magical connection to this hawk. It allows him to see from the bird's eyes. When you put a second set of eyes into a highly trained archery unit, something really cool happens, because all of a sudden you have the hawk flying over the battlefield, allowing the wardens to see troops that the rest of the archers can't. But by his direction, they can aim up in the sky, loosen their volley, essentially allowing them to shoot without direct sight. And lastly are the Dawn Riders. These are definitely my favorite models from this faction. They're absolutely gorgeous. And I'll have to say, sadly, there's not a lot here in terms of lore. What is thoroughly emphasized, though, is the unique bond between rider and mount. That these elves spend years communing with their horses, becoming increasingly more like in sync as time goes on. Just as the Wardens can channel their magic into their weapons, so too can the Dawn Riders. The difference is this is a purely offensive unit, in direct opposition to the defensive uses for Wardens. As such, small groups of Dawn Riders can expend their Ether Quartz, channel their magic, and smash headlong into unending hordes, and not falter or slow. They are the spears of Teclis himself in battle, and are disciplined and unrelenting as any other Lumineth. Now I want to pause here and talk about why are these units cool. Nearly every unit we've talked about being a wizard is just awesome. Eltharion, I didn't know much about him. I'm really in it for the model, to be honest with you, but nonetheless, this is the kind of old world callback that I like, right? I mean, I've talked before about old world, characters coming into AOS, and people have very different opinions about them. For me personally, I like when there's kind of a nod, but it's not necessarily like the character. This is one where it's like, oh, I was really interested to learn more about Eltharion this week. There's not like a ton of lore there. He doesn't have like a massive, omnibus of books centered around him, I don't think, at least that I could find. I did ask a few people who play fantasy battles, or specifically high elves, to give me some information, and it was pretty much what I covered, of just like being a general. He had one edition where he was blind, and then they kind of retconned that, and then he did play a part in the End Times as well, which is where I knew him from. But the reason I like this level of callback is I don't feel like I'm missing anything by not having this epic mythos behind them. I can just appreciate him for what he is. Like, I need a hero. Teclis remembers this one amazing hero from the old world. We pulled him back. He has a new incarnation. Something didn't quite go right, and here he is. It's just as rewarding for new folks as it is for those who played High Elves back in the day. Now, when it comes to the Cathalar, I'm not a huge fan of the model, and I will say that they didn't delve too much into the emotional anguish aspect that the Lumineth endure. It's cool, I just kind of need a bit more information about it. If there was a Black Library novel, or even a short story, to be honest with you, maybe it's in there, and I'd really like to read more about the Cathalars and how they kind of fit into the army, how they are respected as such, what the school of thought and training is to become one. I'd love to know more about them. It's just at this point I don't feel like they really fleshed that out. As for the troops, I love them, straight up. It feels like the most elfy thing ever, right? You choose a discipline, and you study and master it to the extreme. There's no casual archery. You pick up a bow, and you set it down when you're dead, and every moment in between is about perfecting your shot and killing enemies. Every unit has a role, and I, as a player, I really like that. I like when a unit's purpose is crystal clear. Your shield guys, they're going to guard stuff. They're going to stand in the way, and they're going to be a bulwark. Your arrow guys they're kind of more of a support unit, but they do a lot of damage. They can anyway. And then your cavalry are your fists, right? And that's going to smash the enemy really, really hard. I like that each one of them has a very clear stated goal. This is what we do, and we do it to the max. But what are your thoughts? What do you like about these units? Go ahead and tell me in the comments down below. For me personally, my favorite is, as I said before, the Dawn Riders. I do intend to at least get that battalion up and running for my Lumineth army, and I'm very excited to see how it turns out on the battlefield. So let me know down below what's your favorite unit that you're most excited for, and your thoughts on the heroes here in this section. And we'll be covering the Alarith, the rock-themed dudes, in the next episode. Thank you all so much for watching and listening. I look forward to seeing you in my next Age of Sigmar lore video. Happy wargaming. Hey everybody, I hope you enjoyed that video. It was made possible by the folks over here to the left. These are my top supporters over here on YouTube and on Patreon that keep this channel going. If you'd like to learn more about how to become a supporter and get some cool things in the process, like exclusive pictures and interactions with me, and get your questions answered here on the channel, go ahead and click any of the links down below or the join button on the community page over on YouTube. Regardless of your choice, I wanted to thank you so much for joining me with this video, and I look forward to seeing you in my next one. Happy wargaming.